Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PCS3 Grand Final pre-show. I'm Cameron Davis, and I'm joined by my favorite movie theater snack, Mike and Mike, also known as Porosaurus and Hypoc. We are here to talk about the Grand Finals in a way that we haven't really had a chance to before. There are so many teams, so many storylines that we haven't necessarily felt that we've had the opportunity to really dive as deep into it as we'd like to. So that's what we're doing here today. You can probably tell, looking at the length of this video, that it is going to be already a lot longer than a lot of the content that we have produced before here at PUBG North America. However, with 16 teams overall, we still did have to make some concessions. So we're unable to talk about all 16 teams. Instead, we've picked out, I believe it was 9 teams that we think are going to have the greatest influence on the Grand Finals, whether that is the greatest chance of winning or otherwise being an important factor in other teams winning or just having an interesting storyline on their own. So with all of that out of the way, let's start at the top because where else is there to go? And we're going to talk about everyone's favorite squad, Shoot to Kill. This is Alo, Luke 12, Pretty Curdy, and Civil. And if you don't know that already, then you're obviously a new viewer because we can't stop talking about them because of just how strong and how successful they are. And first things first, up with these guys, it needs to be said how strong of a roster these boys are just as a whole collection of 4. I'm just going to throw that out there. The two of you can fight over where we're going to go to it from there. I don't know what else needs to be said.
Okay.
I mean, don't all start at once.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I mean, it makes sense to go down the list, right? You're second in line.
Am I second? Oh, yeah, I am. I'm in the middle. Okay, cool. Yeah, you're talking about a team that started out. I mean, when they came out in week 1, 77 and 74 points respectively. They came out just extremely strong, extremely fast, and they never really slowed down from there, with the exception of a couple of days. The B versus C groups, they didn't manage to get as many points, but they still got 33 and 24, so like respectable. But you got to wonder, going back and looking maybe at the B versus C lobbies, what was there or maybe a better question would be what wasn't there or who wasn't there that made those lobbies a little bit more difficult for them to get points in.
Yeah, I mean, the big one for me has been them kind of, when we talked historically about Shoot to Kill, and obviously that kind of Miramar uptick in terms of average points per game, and I'm talking way back to like NPL, obviously. Not really excluding this year, it's not been as much of an issue, but the fact that they've kind of brought those closer together now and they're adapting the same sort of play style across both maps has been something that's been really exciting to watch. I mean, we've talked a couple of times about obviously gonna be in the 5th man for this team, and these things that they're kind of setting up and rehearsing or doing their homework on out of game, and that's really showed in like particularly military circles on Erangel, mil to power circles as well with those lumberyard plays. That's what's been most exciting about this team for me, because the bread and butter of Shoot to Kill is the way they play Edge, right? And it's not really this kind of execution kind of style. In terms of like crashing compounds, it's very rare we'll see them go to the last resort for them, which is send it and find a compound. And I think that really speaks to where we've seen them kind of farming, because other teams are just incapable of dealing with the firepower on this roster when they put it to that effect.
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head a little bit there with one of those things, is that it does not seem like there is any situation that team finds itself in that it does not feel like it has the upper hand in. Like they don't feel like they're ever out of their element, or they're fighting from behind. Really, it feels like any poor situation that they find themselves in, they've got a plan for. Key example being military island circles on Erangel. They loot up in South George. Now they've got a plan for that. They know exactly what they're going to do. They're not going to go for placement points. They're going to go for kills and try to camp out other teams making their way in from the north side. And then if you look at it on an individual level, I mean, obviously Luke 12 is playing out of his freaking mind right now. I mean, the guy's just bananas. But there is no weak link on that team. I mean, you look there, I mean, Alo with 49 kills, Kurt with 49 kills, Civ with 48 kills, and all of them with over 8,500 in damage. I mean, that would be top of the line on any other team in this lobby. and you got all of that coming from one same team. It's a scary proposition.
I mean, the other thing on that as well, and this isn't at all to say that he was a weak link prior, but for me, the most improved player this year in North America has been Kurt. Like, hands down for me, in terms of an IGL, in terms of individual kind of ability, that guy has stepped up time and time again. And again, like I said, not to identify him as the weak link, but when you're alongside Alo, Luke, and Uncivil, it's very easy to be kind of overshadowed by that. But this is one of the teams that you see them all kind of achieve a higher level than others, like as 4 individuals.
Yeah, it's just, I think overall it's safe to be said that this is the one team in North America, and you can make arguments for others, but if you had to pick only one, it would be STK. Of there is no upgrade available amongst any of these players. If when the time eventually comes that a player either moves on to another squad or leaves the game entirely or something else happens, it's going to be a very, very shocking day, because it just seems like such a strong, cohesive unit that has no real way of stopping. However, that being said, we do also need to put a little bit of a spotlight on Luke 12, I think, because while that is a very strong roster overall, in this particular group stage, his numbers have been looking amazing. He won like 4 out of the 5 bounties by himself this year in terms of kills, assists, knocks, and then, of course, the MVP, and it was Tiggleton that got the damage, if I have that all correct. But that was the only one. He only missed out on 1. And you're looking at his overall numbers. He has 75 kills compared to the high 40s of everyone else. And if you also look at the amount of points that he himself is attributed towards, it's just over 100, while everyone else is sitting around 65 to 75. So his performance especially has been very, very strong. The quick question I want to ask you guys is, does he need to keep up these numbers? I feel like I already know the answer to this already, but does he need to keep up these numbers in order to guarantee a first place spot over another team like the Sonics or even Oath?
So, for want of a better term, I don't think Luke 12 carries this roster. I definitely think he's the star player of the team, and yeah, we can talk about stats all you like, but there's a much deeper story with STK, which is the fundamental difference between the way they handle poor circles over other teams. And again, when you have this roster, it's very easy to say, well, you know, we can walk through the 3 teams that are between us and that new circle that's just posted. But I definitely don't think, you know, if Luke slacks off a little bit, this team falls apart. I don't think that's the case at all.
No, I'm right there with you. I think that even if Luke's number started dwindling a little bit, I think they're still in a great position because of something that we'll talk about, you know, with other teams here today, and that's just the ability of the IGL to put Luke in positions to where he can get those points, right? Like, it's not just the Luke 12 show. Now, that being said, there were a bunch of, well, several times you can go back and look at where Luke might have been like the last one left up alive, and he still manages to creep out a couple of points here and there and still do damage and still go and take fights as a solo, and that's just like a straight up confidence thing. But I mean, that's the mentality of the whole team, right? It's high risk, high reward, and you know, they've actually managed to lower the high risk thing. It's not as high a risk for STK as it is for anybody else because of how good their communication is, how good their teamwork is, and how strong their mechanics are individually.
Yep. And so Hypoc, when we first brought up SDK, you did bring up the conversation about looking at their map performance, and I do want to have that as sort of the bow to tie up this team before we move on to the next, because that will lead us into an interaction, a relationship, you could say, that a lot of us are already aware of with another squad. But you already mentioned that previously, I believe it was during 2019, they were considered a Miramar team, not exclusively, but very heavily Miramar favored. But actually, I think it was the last PCS2, if I'm reading my numbers correctly, that not only did they even it out, but their Erangel actually overtook their Miramar by a fair bit, and that sort of balanced out a little bit here. I didn't know if either of you had any sort of comment on if that is a particular change in their playstyle or more just happenstance of getting just a few points on 1 or 2 Miramar games.
I mean, I think we've definitely seen a big shift, and even when we look back to PCS1, we've seen a big shift in the way that SDK are kind of handling bad circle RNG. And again, I hate going to that term in PUBG, but I mean, take for example this situation with ATC on Erangel, right? Military circles, we've seen them time and time again now set up for that. Even not necessarily on military circles, even on just like Eastern or Northeastern circles. We've seen them interact with ATC heavily. And there are very few teams that actually, that you can visibly see time and time again, that damage control. Because STK is all about, like, if we're going to go out, we're putting points up first.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at ways that they improved on Miramar, I mean, this is something that I know we had a question about coming into this split was how are they going to deal with Miramar when they always seem to run into Oath on that northeastern side? Well, it turns out all you got to do is, instead of coming in from the northeast, just keep rapping until you get to the northwest, and then you have to deal with Illusion. And that's a better fight for STK almost every day of the week. So, they found ways to improve upon their Miramar without having to make drastic changes. And a lot of that has to do with the coaching and the IGLing of Kurt, right? It's avoiding those potential hangups early game on these northern circles or extreme southern circles where they have to do any long wrapping, and it's paid off huge. I mean, obviously, they have 177 total points earned on Miramar, which is top of the lobby, top of anybody. They did obviously well on Erangel as well, but now they're a more complete team all the way around, and I think that was something that they were really looking to improve upon, and we're seeing the results of that training.
Okay. I think at the end of things, we've pretty much made it clear that SDK, while there's a discussion that we're going to have in a little bit about whether they are the favorites to win PCS3, they are certainly up there in the conversation, and they have been for the longest times. However, I will say I'm a little disappointed in both of you because you didn't take my bait of having a clean transition into the next team, which, of course, is going to be NE Trolls in chat, a team that is known for dropping very close to SDK. But apparently, maybe I just missed it. Maybe I just missed it then. By the way, they drop close to each other on both Erangel and Miramar, and so there's certainly a relationship between the two teams there. But there's more to ATC than just their drop spot in relationship to SDK.
There is, yeah. I mean, I know Poro's probably got the stats for this, but they did account for a large proportion of points going over in favor of STK, and it didn't really, I mean, until we got to the last week, that was the only time we really saw them actively. And again, I remember casting the game and Poro kind of DMing me and being like, yo, dude, look at ATC. And that's kind of shocking to see, really. It got to that stage of the series, if you like, and that was when they were like, okay, yeah, it's actually causing us problems, what the hell's going on? But ATC for me in general, aside from kind of like the early game frustrations, they were kind of an anomaly because it was like, oh my god, ATC have ended in 4th again, like what the hell's going on there? It was definitely one that came out of nowhere that, I mean, myself as a caster and an analyst across all PCS this year, I wouldn't have put them up there. Like, I'll openly put my hands up and say that, but they've demonstrated their ability to rely much heavier on the strengths of this team in terms of like team fighting and actually hard committing to taking control of compounds, terrain, anything like that in the early to mid game. That really has been the backbone of why they're able to put so many points up.
Yeah, and look, SDK, obviously SDK has that. We talked about their wanting to go out and maybe do a little bit of hunting for ATC, but ATC's only problem has not been SDK. ATC has also had the big problem with Illusion, and it's you look at the stat line. Out of all the times that ATC has died, 49 times they've died to those two teams in specific. So it's trying to find a way to avoid STK and Illusion from that North George looting spot or specifically on Erangel should be priority number one for ATC moving forward because going into this split, we talked about them with the addition of Sharpshot, how that kind of sent a message about what type of PUBG they were wanting to play, right? Like they look to be built to be this hard attacking, we're going to push everything, we're going to fight and scrap. And the problem is that they haven't been able to really do that. Now, Sharpshot's still getting his numbers. He's still getting his money. but the rest of the team is kind of getting picked apart, and they're losing members early and in early mid game, so it's rare that you get to see a full 4-man strong ATC towards the late game. Now when you do see them, you see what they're capable of. They'll push into fights, they'll push into everything, and they win. But it's just getting to that point of the game that's been the issue for them. So if they can get that figured out, I think ATC is scary.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really good point, because it's very easy to see where they lose one, like before Circle 1's even closed, whereas as 4 in Circle 4 or 5, they commit to a team fight and they lose one. They're actually a team that, they're not afraid to still play a circle aggressively or a position aggressively as 3 people, like moving from mid to late game. But if they lose one in rotation, you see them instantly default to this kind of turtle, we want to get something, and sometimes even before Circle 1 closes, gambling on a compound to try and get something, to say, look, we're down to 3. We just need to sit somewhere for the next few circles because we're damaged now. So having that same kind of, I guess, ethic throughout the bigger picture is probably a huge opportunity for ATC to maybe step their game up a bit.
Yeah. And in regards to you referencing their 4th place finish in PCS2, is it fair to say that a lot of those points came from them holding down, almost in contrast to talking about SDK's like strength on the edge? ATC's strength, it looked like, at least from that single event, was them sort of holding down a central position and just not having to move all that much anymore. But then when you look at the group stage for PCS3, they're now down in 12th place. And you're saying that there's a team play emphasis over sort of a macro rotational, playing the circle, playing the terrain map, whatever you want to call it, sort of emphasis. But is it, I don't know, is there the conversation to have that 4th place finish the previous PCS was an anomaly?
I mean, yeah, I said that up front. I do feel like it's an anomaly. For them now, like it's kind of got to the point where they're actually being tested, and I think that's, I don't want to say coming apart at the seams, but it is showing a huge opportunity for them to kind of actually round out their overall team performance. Because if a team's going to mess with you, you need to bite back. And one thing they're not doing with STK is biting back. I even said it the last week of the group stages. It was like, yeah, we're dropping the other side of the map. We don't want to deal with this nonsense, yada, yada, yada. But you either change your drop spot or, you fight for what you've got. And ultimately, in that regard, ATC being on the back foot in so many games in terms of losing people early or having their rotations messed with, adding an extra minute to Circle 1 or Circle 2 rotations is obviously causing them a lot of problems.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. I think it's really just if they can figure that out. And to be fair, it wasn't just on Erangel. I mean, on Erangel, they actually got more points. It's their Miramar that's been kind of their issue. And so, having to deal with the problems that they're already having on Erangel, and then adding that to the Miramar issues. I don't know I'd have to go back and take another look at the Miramar games, take a closer look to figure out what it is that's going on there. But either way, I think it's just they've been playing behind the 8 ball. And I think the biggest thing is that, you got the new roster, and, new rosters are great when everything's going great. It's
the honeymoon
once you
period.
find yourselves in these, exactly. It's once you find yourselves in these bad situations, and how long does it take you to get out of them? How do you work with each other? How do you talk to each other about how to fix it? That's when we'll see what the team's really made of. And, we, towards the end of if I'm not mistaken, towards the end, we started seeing them kind of turn things around a little bit. Yeah, the last week, 35 and 38 points in both lobbies. So that might be a signal of things kind of starting to turn around more in their favor. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah. So yeah, the ATC definitely one of the few unknowns that we have in this grand final. Could be a repeat of PCS2, or could be a repeat of PCS1, where they're down in the.
There's more than a few unknowns, Cameron.
Yeah. I'm trying to set up a transition, okay? You boggled it. That's fine. We're jumping off of Sharpshot being added to the roster, who came from Veritas, and this team, going on to them next, this was a little bit of an interesting change on some parts, but I guess on the other parts, not so much. And I'm talking about their roster change of dropping Sharpshot and Pentalol both considered very, very strong players in North America, but then when you consider their performance during PCS3 Grand Finals, we all knew that something had to change, and their pickup of Michael and Dietrich's, while maybe not, there's a conversation whether those are like straight one-for-one replacements for Sharpshot and Pentalol. Their overall results, would we say that it speaks better than the previous squad?
I mean, I have a lot to say about this, because this was like the roster move for me, and I was so excited to see this roster in action. Michael, in my eyes, massively underrated, even dating back to like the Pittsburgh Knights days. Like I just didn't really think he's a massively underrated player. Alongside that, we have Dietrich. So we know Comets previously didn't really make noises. They didn't really light the world on fire. Didn't really do much of anything, to be honest. But Dietrich, we saw him pop off quite a few times with that roster, which is when you can kind of identify kind of one player that's like consistently the factor, like the variable for a team. That's kind of the player you want to see. Well, actually, you know, what could he do on a better team? What could he do with a better setup or teammates around him? This is not to kind of say, you know, previously Sharpshot and Penta were not pulling their weight, but I think in terms of like the fundamentals, like the bigger picture, this roster should perform better than previously, and that's mostly due to like when you break it down, a lot of it comes down to Keenan. Everybody kind of knows what Keenan's leadership style is, his in-game leadership, his communication style. I think it takes a particular type of player to play alongside that. It can be overwhelming. I think there's maybe an element that Penta and Sharpshot, both being fairly quiet players, potentially sometimes got lost in that noise. Jazza and Michael, I think, are two players that are much better suited to that style of in-game leadership. And I think Dietrich can also lean into that a bit better, maybe, because then it's 1 versus 3. If you have 3 loud people in comms, you generally elevate your energy to that, right? So this is one I was super excited to see, but whether or not we've kind of seen all the pieces fit together yet is another story.
I mean, yeah, you're right, because they did get 12th place. But them having a week 2 being a 100-point week alone.
7th?
Yeah, I said that right. What did I say?
I said 12th.
I said 12th. That was ATC. They're 12th. Yes, Veritas, they are in 7th, which maybe not, as you mentioned, be as high as we were expecting this roster, but they did have a 100-point week during week 2. Yeah. Is there an argument there for them getting their legs under them? It does seem to be a complete swap and play style, so do we think that 7th is going to be a reflection of what to expect come the Grand Finals?
No, I mean, I didn't have as high of expectations for Veritas coming in, and that's just because of the fact you changed 2 players on the roster. That's a big change, right? Yeah. And I'm more willing to give you the kind of the benefit of the doubt and give you time to kind of pick it up. And you know, so I wasn't. I mean, 7th for them, for me, is huge. Now, I mean, you look at the leaderboard or the stats. Dietrich and Michael, obviously huge pickups. I mean, they're pretty much carrying the team in terms of kills and damage. I mean, obviously Keenan still kind of up there as well. Jazza still looking at kind of a support role in that setup. But you know, for whatever it's worth, Dietrich and Michael coming in, they've been able to find their points and be able to play their game with Keenan that way. Now, I don't think we've seen the ceiling of this roster at all. I think that they're capable of doing much more, and that's kind of what the question mark is, right? Like, you look at teams like STK and Sonic's, the other top of the leaderboard teams that we always see. You kind of know what their ceiling is. You've seen it, and with Veritas, I think we're still figuring that out.
Speculation.
And I'm excited. Yeah, exactly. I'm with Hypoc though. I still think that they're set up to be one of the best teams in the league. It's just a question of how long it's going to take.
Okay. But is the Grand Finals here too soon?
I mean,
you know,
for me,
I don't know.
No, I don't think it's too soon. I think by now, like, again, the teams that kind of scrub the group stages off as a better opportunity to really put your team to work and iron out those kinks. Again, the first time you're going to be tested as a new roster is when you come up in those weird situations where you can't set out a plan that gets executed perfectly, and come circle 3, you're still inside the circle and you have the opportunity, blank canvas wise, to push somebody. The first time a team is really tested is when, you know, look at the STK and ATC situation. You've got a team that's actively coming out to mess with your rotations, to literally throw a spanner in the works in terms of your game plan. I think now, once the group stages are out of the way, we should be seeing Veritas kind of hit their form, so to say. I don't think we'll like a flick of a switch. I don't think we'll see them like achieve their ceiling, but we should now see them coming into form.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, to go along with that that leeway that I was going to cut for a lot of these teams that made these big roster moves where they put on 2 new players or 1 new player, I said that group stages was their time to kind of figure stuff out. They had to have it figured out by grand finals. If you don't have it figured out by grand finals, what are you waiting for? What's the next event? I don't know. You don't know. So, you know, this is your time. This is your last opportunity, your big opportunity to show what this roster is capable of. And you had the whole group stages to prepare. You've had the whole group stages to find what you do well and what you need improving on. And so if you're not going to get it now, I don't know. But that being said, I still don't think even after this we'll fully know the ceiling of some of these rosters, especially teams like Veritas. You know, we'll just see what their best is at the current time that they're able to pull out.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next team then. We already talked about where Sharpshot previously on Veritas, where he went to ATC. Let's talk about where Penta went, which of course is Duel. And this is a team that throughout the entirety of this year is been so hard to talk about, because consistently we've been looking at the squad, whatever iteration it might be, usually with just Wooly and Cherry involved, and say, okay, this is a squad that we're going to see big things come out for them, and it never actually happens. And when we saw this roster get picked up with Lynxy, with Pentalol, and add that to Cherry, 3 amazing fraggers, with Wooly, who's a veteran IGL, we said, okay, fine. 3rd time's the charm. This is finally going to be it. And it's been better, but it's been mixed results. Currently sitting in, well, they ended group stage in 8th place. What's our read on these guys come grand final?
I mean, they would have had to actively try to not do better than previously in my eyes, because it's just been...
Okay, that's true.
It's been not... And this is a team very close to my heart. That's why the disappointment is so severe for me. But, I mean, if we look at it, Cherry and Penta, like, individually look very good last phase in PCS2, kind of individually, respectively, for wherever they were. I was excited for kind of this Simplicity rework, if you like. But the big variable that comes into this is Lynxy. And Lynxy coming through PCS2 was like the top performer for Astra in OCE. Like statistically wise, and again, it was visible in game as well. He's a very good addition to round this out. And bear in mind that this isn't a 4 that has played together. I think last time we talked about this, it was Cherry that came in last, right? For the Simplicity roster. I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but the ceiling for this team is very high, but it's going to rely heavily on the ability of Wooly to kind of utilize these guys to that ceiling. And it's often we talk about whatever team Wooly's on, he's kind of the key part, right? As an IGL, but also as a leader, as the team captain. If anything, I think this is the best chance for him to do so, as he's already very comfortable with these guys. There's not going to be any kind of teething problems with a new player that's not going to have any knowledge of playing with Wooly before. The biggest threat for this team is for them to perform on a macro level. I have absolutely no concerns about this team, like in terms of fragging ability, but it's Wooly's ability to kind of implement that macro plan.
I kind of want to push back just a little bit on that. And Poro, I'm going to let you talk as well right after this, though. But when you say Lynxy coming in as a star player from Astra, his numbers aren't looking that great. It's Pentalol and Cherry that are, of course, having the greatest performance statistically. And Wooly, it's always hard to do this, but if there is a player on your roster that can afford to have lower numbers, it is of course going to be the IGL because of all of the stuff that they bring in outside of just the fragging ability. But Lynxy is only sitting on 27 kills throughout the entirety of the group stage. His points pickup as an individual is only just below 42, while Cherry and Pentalo are both at 65 or 67.67. So this isn't the Lynxy that I think this squad was expecting.
No, I did say he was the top performer in PCS2 for Astra. So I said he was a good addition to the team.
No, sure, but I just mean is this surely isn't Lynxy fully transitioning over, bringing all of this stuff. He hasn't reached his high performance that this roster, I guess, might be needing in order to be that powerhouse that we're alluding to.
Sure, maybe not. I have absolutely no doubts about Lynxy being better than half of the North American lobby, though. So for me, it again, like I said, it comes down to how well Wooly can kind of implement this macro plan and get these guys to a position where they're able to win as 4. As far as I'm concerned, Cherry, there's been a lot of situations where he's last man up and, you know, he's picking up 1 or 2 kills before going down. Penta's a player that we've seen do a lot of damage in the early to mid game. Constantly looking to pressure rotations, and he picks up a lot of points in that way. I don't think it's really fair to say, yeah, Lynxy statistically isn't delivering yet on this roster, because I don't think overall this roster is really hitting the ceiling that I mentioned. I don't think they're really there on a macro level as this 4 now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, hey, obviously, you know, I think you'll see Lynxy's stats start going up. You know, obviously they've had the group stages to kind of get things worked out. For whatever reason, it's taken them a little bit of time to get adjusted or whatever, and that's fine. But I mean, you go and look at Twitch on any given night, you can see Lynxy's out there grinding and playing with the boys. You know, and one thing that's kind of different is that you see these guys playing together for fun. So you rarely see that from other teams because they play so much together for business purposes, as it were. But these guys actually enjoy playing with each other. Now, that being said, obviously Cherry and Penta doing really, really great things for the team. I think you can expect Lynxy's performance to start going up in a statistical thing. I am going to key in on Wooly though. I love Wooly. Wooly and I talk to him all the time. We talk all about the game, and we'll DM back and forth at different times. But you know, I got to key in him on him a little bit here. 20 kills and 4,000 damage. While yes, you're an IGL, and you know exactly what you were saying. IGLs get a little bit of slack. I think IGLs used to be able to get slack. Okay. If you're trying to be a top team in North America these days, you're competing against Kurt. You're competing against HWin. You're competing against, you know,
Pack Caps.
You know, Keenan. You the days of being able to be the
chess
IGL
master
that contribute. Yeah, that you basically are, you know, giving up on one player's worth of damage and kills. Those days are over. You've got to be able to step it up down. And the crazy thing is, we know Wooly's capable.
Yeah.
Right. We've seen that he can play that role, and he can get the frags and he can get the kills. One thing I'd love to see him work on is his lines when he's scouting, man. It seems like he dies scouting just all the time. Same with Maluk, but that's another good. But basically, this is just me saying, like, Wooly's one of the best, if not, you know, arguably one of the best IGLs in North America. I would love to see the stats start following that as well, and start seeing him contribute to the team in a different way than just IGLing, if that makes sense. And I don't want him to think I'm picking on him, because I'm really not. Because but
no, I don't.
Numbers don't lie.
You think I mean, am I crazy?
I don't think it's unfair at all to kind of make that observation. It's kind of, I still have faith is the thing, because I've seen Wooly deliver before. Wooly has delivered. Yeah. I mean, look at the Sonics last year through MPL. There was a time where Wooly was keeping pace with that entire roster, other than Tiggleton, obviously, because Tiggleton was like 30 kills and 10,000 damage above everybody else in the league anyway. But Wooly was keeping pace, so I definitely think He has the capability to do so. I've always struggled to put my finger on why he doesn't. Whether or not it's that the weight of responsibility, and that kind of clouds his judgment in terms of scouting, team fighting, losing 1v1s and things like that. It's always been so difficult because the age-old thing with Wooly is he builds a roster and they're absolutely nuts for 3 months and then they drop Wooly because they want somebody that can frag. I would love for him to be able to just keep pace because that's the expectation, right? I mean, if you can maintain just a 1.0 in terms of kills, like in my eyes, if the team's doing well and your IGL's keeping pace and at least breaking even, you're going to be in a good spot more often than not.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So let's on that point, I think we should just go ahead and jump on to the next team, which is one of the other top teams in North America. Of course, they won PCS2 Grand Finals. It's Sonics, H-Twin, Mime, Shrimzy, and Tiggleton, the other top fragger from the Oceanic region with 60 kills by himself. Won the MVP for, not MVP, but he won the most damage from PCS3 Grand Finals. What is there to say about this team that hasn't already been said? Them and SDK are the consistent top 2 powerhouses of North America, and they have been for essentially this entire year. Fragging power. That's, I think, like if there is one little description of these boys, that's got to be it.
Yes and no. I think now seeing it's been much easier recently to identify H-Win's role, not just as an IGL, but in terms of looking at the pieces on the board, where he's positioning and what he's doing in game. And obviously it's always well and good saying he's the IGL, he can sit back and kind of call the shots, yada, yada, yada. But actively seeing him take up off angles, play anchor positions in like the late game, for Sonics is like as enabled to. I mean, when you've got Shrimzy, Mime, and Tiggleton charging towards you in circle 6, like, and they're free to do so because H-Win's got this just disgusting angle to oversee the whole thing. Not many teams are going to be able to kind of put up a defensive line and stop that. But his ability to kind of micromanage has enabled them to aggressively take that control. We didn't really see that previously. Again, with Tiggleton when he first came in and replaced Profi, didn't really make that bang that everybody thought he was going to do. Now that Tiggleton's kind of found that form, I think H-Win now is allowed a little bit of slack. There's a little bit less emphasis on that micromanaging element. And again, I mean, when you look at it, like Tiggleton find his form now. H-Win kind of turning a corner in terms of statistical performance because he did have a bit of a stinker early on in the year. Again, I think that's fair to say. He said the same thing himself. Mime coming up time and time again in like really clutch situations, whether it be endgame or, clutching out a team fight or something like that. And then Shrimzy, in my eyes, being one of the most consistently stable players and overall positive players. Like having that guy's energy and comms is a huge thing. I think that's why we've now seen kind of Sonics align a bit better, and we are seeing the consistency from them because that was the problem before, was consistency.
I mean, shit, talk about consistency. Week 1, 101, week 2, 102, week 3, 104. That is a straight line there.
Yeah, Sonics, it seems like they've found their groove now. Obviously, Tiggleton's phenomenal and great, and much like Luke 12, you got to give credit to H-Win to being able to put that team in position for Tig to kind of do what he does, and credit to H-Win himself too. Like he's kind of found himself. I mean, he only had one less kill than Tig in this whole thing, so a little bit less on the damage, but we're not going to count that.
It's the IGL slack. I guess a little bit.
That's all it is. So I mean, the biggest question mark about Sonics was PCS2. They got so much circle love. I mean, much circle love. Now, is that? But is it the reason they won? Yeah, it's arguable. It's arguable because the fact that it's a factor that you get circle love, but you have to be able to capitalize on it, right? And this is a team that capitalized on it time and time again in PCS2 Grand Finals, and that's why they won so dramatically. Now the question is, do they need that?
Well, for me, you make a really good point, because I think previously there was a larger reliance on that circle luck. And that's kind of their ability to deal with bad circles, right? And again, like I said earlier, the best way to test a team is not to give them blank canvas. They come from Pachinki, they rotate to a quarry circle and see where they set up in circle one. If they get some circles, they're going to win the game because they rotate fast and nobody really goes to contest the center of the circle on bad circles like that in North America. There are very few heavily center-oriented teams in North America. And that comes down to, again, some of the wacky circles we've been seeing. I think that's definitely a consideration to make. But now that Sonics have tightened up all of those other things, I now think that they're potentially better equipped to deal with some of those poor circles. Again, we've seen them maintain kind of 2-1-1 splits through circle 1 and 2, where they, Plane's bad and Pachinki's in a good spot to go to Gatka, and they can maintain these aggro splits. And that's where they now, you could say, oh, well, they rotated in circle 1 and then they stayed there. Well, yeah, okay, unless the circle's ending on Pachinki, I don't really want to hear about circle luck, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, look, hey, they're still managing to get these 2-2 splits and keep the 2-2 splits going and protect themselves and still do damage and make noise from wherever they are. But I guess the question I have right now is, if you're looking at Sonics, right, you're looking at Sonics in comparison to STK. Of those two of those teams, who do you think is better, has shown that they're more capable of handling bad circles? And in my eyes, it's STK, but that's just because STK has to deal with more bad circles from the spots that they loot, right? Like the North George and
again, throw Oath,
Hacienda versus
throw
Center.
Oath into that equation, right? As soon as we stop seeing some Milta Power circles, like, I'm sorry, but we saw them stumble. I think it's when a team drops in Pachinki and we get a certain circle pattern, you're going to see one team favor it more than the other, or one team kind of benefit from it a bit better than others. And when the other two teams you talk about are dropping in North George and Milta Power, yeah, it's going to be frustrating to see that. But
I mean, look, hey, we've seen Sonics win Oath circles before too. So, that's basically my what I'm saying right now is, I think that Sonics has improved since PCS2, and I don't think they're as reliant on getting that circle luck. But now you've got to deal with, that's basically the next stage, right? If you're one of these top tier teams, is getting to that point where the bad circles no longer really affect you in any way, because you've ascended, so to speak. So, and I think SDK is there. I think Sonics is there. Oath is arguable. We still got to see it, but we haven't talked about them yet. But either way, I think Sonics, if you're looking to place your bets on who's gonna win PCS3, I think even odds on Sonics and STK right now.
All right. Well, let's just jump ahead, though, to the team that you had just mentioned for Oath, because we're going to be talking about them now. At the beginning of the year, they were set up with Sonics and SDK to be like the three kings of North America, the Triple Crown. But Oath's sort of timeline since then it's been up and down. The downs haven't been like drastically downs, but they haven't sort of maintained that consistently at the top, consistently in the conversation as SDK and Sonics are. They added Pat Caps for PCS2, replacing their PCS1 IGL in Wolf. And they've been sort of, you can tell they've been slowly developing their playstyle since then. What do we think about them at this point? Have they sort of finally I guess, put all the pieces together properly where they intended to previously?
I mean, this one for me, and this is kind of weird to say, but previously with Wolf on the roster, like, this was very much a brute force play style, and it worked for them time and time again. Like, they were just capable of like rolling over teams. I mean, in my eyes, this is like, I still stand by this, and I said this at the start of the year, even with Wolf on the roster. I think this is, like, on paper, the most mechanically skilled roster that we have in North America. And that was with Wolf in the picture. I'm not saying that Wolf's a terrible player, but Now adding Pat Caps into the situation, like, I'm doubling down. Like, this is the most mechanically talented roster we have in North America. Why aren't we seeing them do what we know they can do best, or we knew they could do best with the previous IGL, which is just W keying through people? I want to see them really, really hone in on this edge play style. To say that they're stumbling in game and still achieving what they're achieving, for me, means that there's more to deliver from this. Like, they haven't hit their ceiling yet. And I actually think Oath is kind of poised to show us something in PCS3. Like, we've had the time to adjust now. I think with this switch up with Reload that Snake has alluded to, I mean, I'm sure we probably said something one night on the desk that sent Snaker straight to Twitter to tweet about Reload's role switching, and we're just supposed to know that, apparently, because Reload was like, he was the man in Charity Showdown, he was the man in PCS1. Now it's kind of like Snakers is leading the charge, and Reload doing this different role, which Snakers didn't tell us what it was, but I think now that they're actually, there's a much clearer line. There's definitely a line that they're all hitting, as opposed to having a standout player on this team.
Yeah, I mean, Snakers is playing like a madman right now. Reload's playing like a madman. The thing, based off of what I know about the guys that play for this team, if I had to put a finger on what the problem has been, I would say that it's overthinking. Because I know Balefrost is that, I mean, he guy's a student of the game, man. He is, you know, extremely mature, and he takes this stuff very seriously. Reload the same, Pat the same. Snakers is just, you know, he's a killer. But, you know, I wonder, you know, how much second guessing really has kind of been holding them back, you know, in certain situations. You know, and if I was just gonna talk to Oath, I'd be like, look, guys, like, literally everybody knows you are seriously probably one of, if not the best roster in this lobby. There's any team in here, I put you at either equal or better odds to win a straight up 4v4 fight. Like, anything that this team decides to do, it should be able to get away with, just based off of sheer mechanics. Yes. So, you know, hopefully we'll see that kind of play out, because like you said, they shouldn't be relying on circles that fall on top of them, or getting circles to get a whole bunch of points, and then, you know, fighting their way for everything else. And I'm starting to see it a little bit more, to where, like, the bad circles, they're starting to play a little bit better from. They're starting to play with a little bit more confidence. And so that's a scary thing, and that's a scary thing for everybody else in this lobby. But we'll see. We'll see if PCS3 is the time that they really decide to turn it on.
I mean, the thing to come back to as well is it's going to be terrifying if, now that they've kind of tightened up those games where they are having to rely a bit heavier on that macro element, if we then do see a little bit more mill to power circles, because that's a team that I think they probably have one of the best success rates in terms of being in circle 1 and winning the game out of any other team in the lobby.
Well, either winning or just getting
stupid amount of points. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, because you know, you go back and you look at the circles that do fall there on mill to power. I mean, it's not like they have a single play style. I mean, they used to be just go to mill to minor, but now they've changed that up. They started playing the hill. I mean, we've seen them in that crazy. I mean, Cameron, we were the ones that cast that game. The game where they had the 3-1 split with the 3 of Milton Minor and the 1 in the Sniper Tower, which they won with just like a boatload of points. So, I mean, they have the meta. They have it down. Now, if they could find that same level of comfort other places on the map as they do in Milta, which obviously is a difficult thing, right? But you know, damn, like, we could see them absolutely clean up.
Yeah, it's I think I agree with Hypoc what you're saying, and on paper this team is like the most stacked, and I don't even think you need to just put them on paper there. With Reloads and Snakers, they're definitely the two standout players if you had to pick two. But then even Balefrost has had some very, very strong moments. Pat Caps in previous squads has had like very, very standout moments. How terrifying would it be if they could get all 4 of those players to reach their A game at the same time? Because there have been a couple of times that it's been like one player on their A+ game, but then everyone else is on their B or their C game. If they can all get locked in, like Megazord Power Rangers style for the grand finals. This is weird. This might sound weird to say, but STK and Sonics, I think if that happens, I think it's gonna be Oath's grand finals to win. It's because they are just that insane when they're all on fire.
Yeah, I mean, I heavily relate Oath to kind of being like the Na'vi of North America. To be honest with you, like that
Okay.
every so often you can position yourself on the edge, come in slow, and gets like the least congested part of the circle. Again, hard shifts aside, whether or not it comes your way or goes the other way, I want to see them be able to capitalize on the fact that they are just way more talented than a lot of players in this lobby. And again, it's easier said than done. I know I've seen certain things where, you know, they look much better in terms of being proactive about third partying and kind of pressuring teams away from certain spots in the mid game. I just want to see them kind of employ that, you know, brawl gameplay on the edge. That's all I want to see them do. The same way that SDK do, because I potentially would go as far as saying Oath could do it better.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to vote of confidence, I don't get to be on the desk. I don't get to make a pick for grand finals for a while, but Oath is my pick. Oath is my pick for PCS3 grand finals. Write it down. Take your notes.
You heard it here first.
Put it on paper. There you go. Put it on wax. I think Oath wins it.
All right. Well, on that note, we can just jump into our next team. Maybe not necessarily up there as strong in a conversation, but still at the top, close to it, or at least a team that flirts with a top position consistently. It's going to be Zenith. And like Veritas, they came into this with a roster change, maybe not as shocking of one considering their performance, I suppose. But it is Kickstart, Punaj, Roth, and Shinboy. Shinboy and Punaj, the two new players added to the roster. I know I've tried to allude, sort of give parallels to previous teams. I don't think, at least coming from you two, that's going to be the most fair to either squad. But for Zenith Esports, what do we think about them? They ended group stage in 4th place with 238 points. Do we think that they are en route to sort of match that, if not better, during the grand finals?
I mean, this is just a difficult one for me to talk about, to be honest. Like, Roth and Kickstart, again, still delivering what they have done throughout the year, to be honest with you. Again, seeing Punaj and Shinboy kind of get added into this, I was very excited to see what the end result was, but I mean, definitely from the outside looking in, I haven't seen the improvement I was expecting. Which is weird, really, because previously, you know, with previous iterations of this roster, you know, it's like when Roth pops off, they do good. Or, you know, when Kickstart pops off, they have a good game. And now I almost feel like they have a more rounded 4 in terms of, like, the skill level. They're a lot closer matched than the previous iterations. But we haven't seen that come into effect.
Yeah, I think, you know, everybody's been looking at Punaj and Shinboy for years now, you know, wondering when they're going to be able to get involved and what it's going to look like, what they do, you know, once they hit 18. And, you know, this was the first shot, right? This was Zenith's answer to you know, STK, Sonics, Oath, trying to build a super roster, essentially,
yeah.
Which I think we're starting to see a lot more in NA, and I think that's the route we're starting to take. Is you're starting to see more and more of these teams that are actually serious about, you know, winning, and less about like playing with friends for fun. You know, play for fun teams. You know, the teams that are serious about winning, they're starting to stack their roster, and this, on paper, looking at it before anything hit the map, looked like that. It looked like trying to build a superstar roster to compete with SDK and Sonics. And the fact of the matter is, right off the bat, I mean, through the group stage, Shinboy hadn't done anything. Punaj started getting stuff going a little bit. But whether or not the addition of Punaj and Shinboy just kind of opened up Kickstart and Roth to play the play style that they wanted to play. Which I think is hard. I mean, I think that's basically what happened, and that's the success that we saw coming out from Zenith. This is 100% Kickstart and Roth kind of carrying this team to fourth, based off of that. But having Poonage and Shinboy there, right there with them on the charge, taking, even if it's something like Shinboy just drawing attention away from Kickstart for 3 seconds, so Kickstart can kill everybody. It's getting the job done. So the question is, for me, it's, when are Poonage and Shinboy going to start going? When are they going to start playing like these top tier nutters that we have been expecting to come in for the last year or so, year and a half, 2 years? And when are we going to start seeing the numbers that kind of go along with that? Because if we start seeing that, it's going to be, it's kind of the same situation as Veritas, right? Like, it's we don't know what the ceiling is for this team. If this is the floor, though, that's looking pretty damn good.
Yeah, but again, as you mentioned with Shinboy, it's not to harp on one single player, but he's got we're already kind of harping on Wooly for his kill numbers, and that as 19, he's got even one less than Wooly. So, do we think that this is a player that can step it up during the grand finals, or is this sort of the peak of his abilities, and it really is going to be on Kickstart and Roth? Trying to carry even further.
Look at Shinboy at the start of the year. Like, look at Shinboy at the back end of last year. Like, he's not playing to the standard he used to be, and I don't know why that is. So maybe it was the little break, the little hiatus he took. But I think if Shinboy even gets back to 75% of what he was previously, that's gonna raise Zenith's game massively.
Yeah, I agree. I like I said, I think this is the floor of what Zenith is capable of. I think that we're nowhere near the ceiling. So it's really just a question of how long does it take for Shane and Poon to get back kind of into that same place that they were before. Yeah. Because even Poonage, I think Poonage did well, but I think he's capable of doing a lot better.
Yes, absolutely. Poonage was like one of, before like the Cadets pickup, like Poonage was one of the biggest heartbreaks of it being under 18, right? Because he was such a talented individual. Even thinking back to like, what was it, 4 solos and a dream, whatever team it was on, like way back in PUBG Online days, like that dude fragged, and then he went to FlyQuest, and it was slowly downhill from there until he wasn't able to compete anymore. Again, if Poonage gets back to 75% of what he used to be able to put up, again, if the worst Zenith can do is 4th, I'm very excited to see what they can do when everybody's firing on all cylinders.
So I guess to wrap up the Zenith conversation, though, because it sounds like you're both on the same page regarding them, this week and a half that we have from the end of group stage, or rather, they actually have 2.5 weeks, end of group stage to the beginning of the grand finals. Is that enough time for them to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, Shinboy, Poonage, what do we need to do to get those numbers up, to get everything more locked in line? Because if you're looking at it, actually, overall, the team's numbers did take a little bit of a dip during week 3, which I think is also a little bit of a cause for concern. Maybe not too much. We don't want to read too much into it. What are our expectations for the grand finals? We've talked about what they have been doing, what they can do. If you had, gun to your head, if you had to choose, what will they do? Where will they end in grand finals?
I would stand by what I said. Like, I think they definitely have the capability to stay a top 5 team. I think really with this roster change, like I would have liked them to see. I would have liked to see them maybe get thrown into the toss up of, are they a top 3 team? Like, can they feasibly compete with STK and Sonics? I think through the group stages we didn't see that. Grand finals, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think anything lower than 5th will probably be a disappointment.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like you're both saying expectations 4th or 5th. If like the stars aligned, maybe that's being a little too harsh, but like with the possibility of it being higher than that. But I think 4th is a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, top 5 reasonable. And if if all of a sudden everything starts kicking off and Punaj and Shimboy all of a sudden they're like, oh, I remember how to play PUBG again. Like I remember what it is that made me so nutty in the past. Or maybe I stopped second guessing myself or overthinking it and just go in there and start just doing what I do, which is frag out. Like I think that Zenith could be capable of more. So, we'll see.
Okay. Well, on that note, we are going to go to our two final teams, and these two teams are not necessarily ones. They're similar to the ATC, or even Duel in a little bit. They're not necessarily ones that we necessarily think are going to be in the top. They're more of wild card teams. And the first of those two is going to be, oh man, the Houston Hardships. They cursed. They're not ninth anymore. Or 8th, but they are in 6th place with 224 points. Chubba, J-Sank, Lobes, and Maluk. And this is, I think, one of the only teams outside of STK that has had, if I'm not mistaken, 0 roster moves this whole year. Is that because that they think that their ceiling is still even higher than what we're seeing now? Because, I mean, yeah, 6 is definitely better, but surely 9th previously was not a good result for the boys with their individual resumes.
I mean, this one for me is a little bit weird to talk about. Again, Maluk, I still rate highly as. Again, I'd still put him as top 3 IGO in North America,
Okay.
and it's really how well they've been able to consistently kind of play off that and get into a position where they can be on top of a hill or Miramar shooting at 5 different teams at the same time. One bonus I will say is that now everybody's over a 1.0. Again, hats off to J-Sank turning around a rocky start to the year. Lobes has come up huge for this roster. I think in the games where they popped off, Lobes has been a big factor in that. And Chubba, again, I kind of put him in a similar bracket to Shrimsy. I think Chubba's one of those just awesomely consistent players that you want one of them on every team. The problem now is actually we're going to talk about consistency with Hardships, which at the start of the year they were just like consistently like 5th, 6th, right? Now as we've gone on through, like look at the kind of separation of points earned per week. It's glaring to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about Hardships, man. Like going into this season, I didn't make any bones about it. I said that J-Sank needed to step up. I was looking at we did the little thing where we're talking about all the roster moves, all the teams that made roster moves, and I was looking at Hardships, and I'm looking at all these players that were all of a sudden available, and that I think really could have made the Hardships a better roster. And they didn't take anybody. They decided to make no changes. And, I definitely questioned that. And, of course, week 1, day 1, they come in and they drop, 82 points on the damn lobby. So there I am looking like an idiot again. Maluk knows nothing better than how to make me look like a damn idiot. But
to spite you.
But then there's to spite. Yeah.
But
that's the whole reason. That's the whole reason. A pie in the face all over again. But it's you look in that almost makes it more frustrating is the fact that you see that this team is capable of getting 82 points in a day. And then they turn around and it's like 32-30, 15, 42, 23. Like who is this team? Like what are they? Who are they? Like I mean, J-Sank finally, J-Sank, as you said, stepped up in a huge way, leads the team in damage, did what he needed to do, and I said he needed to step up. He stepped up, and yet they're still sitting here in 6th and could very easily have been in 7th and 8th where they normally are. What is it that's holding this team back from being one of those teams that competes for the top 3 all the time? I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Buck, do you have an answer? Because I don't think I do.
Can you figure it out for me?
No, I seem to recall starting that by saying it's one that's really difficult to put my finger on. I again, previously, J-Sank and Lobes were, again, I don't want to say underperforming, but you could say were the contributing factor to maybe them not doing better. But now to talk about a team that Maluk's on and saying consistency is a problem, that's concerning for me.
And it's not like you can even look at the maps either. Like the total points earned on Erangel 107, total points earned on Miramar 117. So it's like it's not like there's one map that's causing them problems either. It's just like, oh, man, I just don't know. I don't know. I will say it feels like they do tend to get nickeled and dimed early quite a bit. Like they'll lose somebody early. So maybe it's kind of that same ATC issue where their strategies of playing with 3 up are just so much different than when they have 4 up, or I don't know. I just have the biggest question mark over my head about this team because I really want them to do well and I want them to succeed, and I feel like I feel like I'm virtually never allowed to question a Maluk team ever again after the 3 NPL back-to-back championships. But what have you done for me lately, man?
Yeah, I do think that we have to actually look at that because this is the first team that Maluk has been on in the longest time, if not ever, that is not Tempo Storm. And so to say that to say that someone is a top level IGL. Yes, if they're on one team for the longest time and they're consistently performing well, then that's great. But at the same time, when there's also other members on those teams that are always consistently performing great, then it could be a little hard to sort of pinpoint exactly what they would bring. And so Maluk now being on a completely different team, completely different roster, do we need to start having the conversation that maybe he was carried by his previous teammates in Tempo Storm?
Nah, no.
Or is that going too far?
Not even close.
I don't think so.
The big thing to take away from Tempo Storm's MPL performance was their macro game. It definitely wasn't the ability for players individually to go out and find points. It was the way they actually muscled that lobby, and that wasn't due to the fragging ability of that roster. It was their ability to pinch teams, third party, rotate little and often, and play the slow game that historically North American teams have struggled with. Again, I'm sorry, but I'll throw the Nations Cup kind of curveball at you. He went there with a roster that arguably wasn't one of the best rosters that we saw at the Nations Cup event, and they did really well. And that was again down to down to the macro that Maluk brings to the table. This guy's earned his creds. As far as I'm concerned, he will go down regardless of whatever the last roster he's on as top IGO in North America, period. Because he's been doing it longer than Kurt's been doing what he's been doing with STK. Like, Maluk's been with Tempo since 2017, and that was they were always a contender.
Yep.
Okay. Well, in that case then, and Poro, you sort of alluded to this earlier when you said that they didn't make any roster moves. At what point are they forced to make those roster moves? Because no matter how much these players get along with each other, no matter how much their leader Maluk sort of has faith in them, the results don't show. Is this grand final, I guess the question is this grand final the last chance that they have before they make a drastic change, before this current hardships project has been proven, for lack of a better term, to be working?
I mean, it's a question if they want to win, right? I mean, do they want to be competing with STK and Sonics, or are they content, playing every grand finals, getting a little bit of a purse?
Maybe they're happy with getting sixth, man. I
mean, hey, it's a consistent payday. Well, I mean, look, I think we've seen the ceiling for this team,
and the floor.
Yeah. It's just, the ceiling and the floor happen to be the same piece of plywood. So, I don't think they're going to get. I don't see them ever getting lower than ninth. I don't see them ever not qualifying for a grand finals. I don't know. you know, if you really enjoy playing with a group of guys, you know, there's a lot to be said about that, and like there's a lot to be said about like that comfort level. But you know, if you want to really start pushing it and start going for these top 3 spots, then I think that changes will probably have to be made. Yeah.
Well, before it gets too hot in here with this conversation, let's go to our final team. It's going to be even hotter because it is the Guadalajara Gas Cans. So that transition wasn't that bad. We'll work on it. We'll tweak a few things. Yeah, so this is the final team that we're going to be talking about. And sort of similar to the hardship, similar to the ATC, ending group stage in 11th place. This isn't necessarily a team that we are going to have full faith behind making a big show of things in the grand finals. However, they are such a dynamic team that, at least for myself, I can't speak for you two, at least for myself, I feel like it would be sort of remiss to just like not at least touch upon briefly. Honey Badger, Noku's, Oldless, and Voxic, they consistently come out in every single game, it feels like, going big, going hard, getting a bunch of kill points, but they're still only in 11th place. When they were previously 303, we had eyes on them to make a big splash in the previous grand finals as well. So I just wanted to sort of, you know, get a little bit of a feeling of what you two are feeling about this squad for PCS3.
I mean, it's not much from me. I'll be honest. Again, this is a team that kind of shows up every so often. Again, it's another team that my biggest criticism is going to be consistency and macro. I think they look good in team fights, and they definitely look good when, you know, they're on the back foot or backs against the blue and they have to take a team fight. One thing I will say is with Honey Badger and Voxic on 303, we saw them kind of adapt in a big reliance on kind of getting to circles early, splitting wide, and then having, you know, 2 or 3 contingency plans. We don't see the same setup with gas cans. Maybe that is a conscious decision, maybe it's not, but definitely for me, the Voxic, very, very experienced player. I want him to be bringing that to the table. Because I think, you know, alongside that, he has 3 fantastic fraggers to kind of build upon.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for Gas Cans is they're a team that plays edge, and it feels like they're still figuring out the best way for that squad to play edge successfully. You know, we saw them come out in the first week. They did really well, and then they just kind of hit this brick wall about midway through group stages where they got, 10 points in a day and followed up by 25 points. It was just brutal stuff. So I think they've seen the positives and the negatives of it. And this is also that team that you know, Honey Badger in particular loves watching Korea. Loves trying to emulate that Korean play style. And you know, there's a few teams in Korea that play edge. Not very many. There's not very many anymore. But you could tell what they're trying to do, but you could also tell that they're still in the process of learning. So when it's successful, it's fantastic. But when it's not, it is a 10-point day. You know, so that's kind of the issue that they're at right now. Like I think the ceiling's still high for Gas Cans. But I just think it's a question of how long is it going to take them to really kind of figure out how to find that consistency while playing that play style, because it's really hard. It's a lot easier to find consistency diving center and playing a compound than it is to find consistency playing the edge.
Yeah. What I thought was particularly interesting about this team, though, is when you look at their overall points, this isn't day or week specific or even group specific. This is just overall points. The amount of kills that they have compared to their placement points is close to 3 times the amount of kills over placements. Every other team that we have talked about here, and I think it's safe to assume that most teams in general are like almost at, if not under, 2 times points. So a very, very kill-heavy squad, early game kill-heavy squad, because we know how much they love to go for these fights. 11th place here. Have we seen the limits of that play style?
I don't think so. I mean, I think they're seeing they're seeing success on Erangel. They just haven't figured out Miramar really yet. I mean,
Okay.
Erangel, and the weird part about it is that they're seeing success on Erangel, and they're a military team, a team that loots up milli base. But they've got almost double the points on Erangel than they've gotten on Miramar, and Miramar is where they really really get into that edge style of play. So they've just had issues on Miramar. I guess we could cut them some slack and say that. But I don't know. I mean, who's to say that Erangel will keep going their way? Because we did. I mean, we got millicircles this time around, and to be fair, I don't think they played the millicircles very well in a lot of cases. In fact, I don't think we've seen them win a millicircle game.
No.
I could be wrong on that. I have to check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So it is weird to see a team that that's all by themselves looting military base is not having that kind of success on military island circles. But that's another thing that maybe could be worked on still.
Yeah.
Smile and nod.
Yeah, smiling. I don't know, because there is
also Oldless has been a great addition. Oldless has been fantastic for
Yeah,
that
he
squad.
has.
Yeah, actually, by far, kill leader of the squad right now with 42 in the group stage. I think it's fair to say that of every single team in the Grand Finals lobby, the Gas Cans are the one that are the biggest unknown. And I don't necessarily mean that in terms of where they are going to end, but is it fair to say that this squad could have one of the largest sort of secondary impacts on another team's success, just because of just this ravenous playstyle?
Maybe there's an element of that, but I don't.
Maybe
think
a stretch.
so.
Okay.
The only reason I would say no is because they play from the south. All our other big teams play from the north.
Well, there you go then.
Okay. All right.
That's about the only that's kind of like they're not going to come in and all of a sudden find themselves fighting shoot to kill super early. I mean, Sonics maybe. Sonics they run into every now and then because they do loot kind of around that Monty area, and then Sonics over in Picado. But it seems kind of rare that we see those teams run into each other. Actually, I could find this out real quick by looking at the our fancy stats.
Yeah. What did the numbers say, Poro?
That CD6 so graciously provide for us. But yeah, like the team that they run into the most was San Diego Rarity. They killed them 31 times. 31 times on a single team, which is by far the biggest on one team, from one team onto another. But when it comes to Sonics, I mean, they just don't really seem to run into each other too much.
So maybe conspiracy theory here. Maybe the real key to being a top team is to not run into gas cans. Is that what you were saying, Poro? Is that you got to loot on the opposite side of the map of wherever the gas cans are playing, and they're like the real aggro like mob in a game.
It's weird because the way that maps set up, it seems like we see you see groupings of who ends up getting in fights with others. So like gas cans, they're getting in fights with comets, hard shifts, obviously Rarity, but then you look at STK, obviously it's ATC, who else, Dodge, you go down to Illusion, like all those northern teams. I mean, SDK's fighting everybody, but even still, they gas cans is like one of the only teams that SDK has only fought like a couple of times, just because of how the map works out. So, that actually stands to be beneficial for gas cans if you think about it. If you're playing the edge and you're playing from the south, you're more likely to run into those teams that are kind of, for lack of a better word, like lower on the leaderboard, almost feeder teams, and you're not having to worry about running into the STKs, the Sonics, and the Oaths, and all those teams. So, You know, that's kind of that weird variable that could end up being working in Gascan's favor. Now that being said, it could have been working in their favor all group stage, but here we are.
It's true. 11th place. Well, with all that being said, those are the teams that I think we wanted to talk about the most. Unless either of you have anything to throw at me, I think we can just wrap up here.
Do we have anything to throw at them?
No, I've nothing else. No, we covered the ones I wanted to talk about, so I'm happy.
I will say I will touch very briefly on Dodge. The reason we didn't talk too much about Dodge is because we think we're not really convinced that Dodge is actually 5th place. Like they caught circles, they caught a lot of luck on days when they didn't get points. They just kind of fell to absolutely nothing. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we don't see them as being a team that is reasonably going to be fighting for the top spot here. And then and personally for me, just because I wanted to, I kind of want to talk about Illusion. I think Illusion is Illusion is that wild card team that you're looking at that's going to have a big influence. Won't probably finish top 5, but could influence the outcome just based off of what they do about ATC, what they do about shoot to kill, what they do coming in from that northern side, because that team is proven to be pretty damn good, and they can handle themselves in a fight. And you could see that team throwing a wrench into the works here for STK or Sonics, depending on how the circles play out. So a couple of wild card teams in there that I think are going to be a little bit more than just feeder fish for the big dogs.
Okay, well, listen, these are all just our predictions and observations. Anything could happen come the grand finals. Hey, as far as we know, it could be a completely different team that we haven't even touched upon this entire day, who's brand new to PCS3. Hedge all, yeah, yes. But with all of that being said, we don't want to keep you here any longer because it has been like over an hour. So we're just gonna wrap up from here. Thank you for watching the pre-show with us. You can tune into the PCS Grand Final starting November 5th, North America, which is 4 p.m. Pacific at twitch.tv/PUBG, youtube.com/PUBG Esports, or tiktok.com/@PUBG.esports.official. Be there or don't. It's up to you. It's 3 weeks of games. There's also Asia, APAC, and Europe that are playing all intermingled amongst each other. But North America, which is the important one, is the Thursday and Friday. With all that being said, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time.